Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Misham Yurth Green the 11th. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Wanderlust by Mary Kirchoff and Steve Winter. I'd like to take a moment and thank the DL Saga members of this channel and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the links in the description below. You can even pick up DragonLance Gaming materials using my affiliate link. That is also in the description below. All right, so this is just my opinion. If yours differs, that's okay. Put your thoughts in live chat if you're joining live. Hey, Chris. Hey, Don. How you guys doing? And if you're watching this after the fact, that's okay too. Put them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you what you thought about this interesting novel. All right. So the way these go is I give you my pre-written review, and then afterward, if there's any comments or thoughts, then I just reply to them based on YouTube live chat, or I'm going to just sort of elaborate on different characters or situations or the world as it is. So feel free to chime in with pretty much anything Dragonlance or Dungeons and Dragons whilst this is going on, and then afterward I will address it. All right, let's have some fun. Wanderlust is, Wanderlust is set up with the familiar tale of Tasslehoff handling the bracelet from Flint. But it expands on it really dramatically. The entire first 100 pages is devoted to this fiasco, and while on the surface that may sound boring or dull, it is anything but that. We have to remember that Taz and Flint are the comic relief duo of the Innfellows. So I was laughing out loud when Taz and Flint were laughing over Tanis being a potential overgrown kender with his not quite elven and not quite human ears, and Flint busting his gut at the thought. So we start with an out-of-context wizard dying and making a deal with Hideous to bring him souls and in return earn power. Then we jump to Solace and its festival. Flint was commissioned by a mysterious woman named Solana. She wanted Flint to craft a copper bracelet inset with jewels, and Flint, not wanting to waste time on a cheap metal copper, asked for an absurd amount of money. She paid it. So Flint had it in a special delivery case waiting for her to arrive at his booth in order to pick it up during the festival. Everyone who saw it wanted to buy it, but Flint insisted that it was not for sale. Then Tasslehoff showed up, and he just grabs it when Flint walks away. When Flint returns and finds it missing, he starts searching the crowd and sees Taz with it on his wrist. Flint shouts for the guards, and Taz insists that he put it on his wrist just to remind him to return it to Flint. Tanis shows up and calms the whole situation down, having Taz return the bracelet, and they all go to the Inn of the Last Home for some ale and a look at Taz's maps. Flint and Tanis will be leaving for Quellanos soon, but Taz said he wanted to go, so they changed it to Abanasinia, so they began looking at maps, drinking a lot, joking and laughing together. At last call, they all realized that they were completely drunk. Flint and Tanis stumble back to their room, and Taz realizes the bracelet is in his hand again, so he pockets it, planning on giving it back to Flint in the morning. Everyone has a hangover the next morning, and Flint loses his mind at not being able to find the bracelet. So they retrace their steps and end up at the inn, only to discover that Taz had left already in the direction of the wind the first thing in the morning. They give chase, knowing he is miles ahead of them out of town. Taz has the bracelet on his wrist, and it gets warm when events are about to unfold, like showing a bit of future. So he sees a tinker named Gaysil coming round the bend and foresees him being attacked. Taz goes to intercept and helps him fight off the goblins that jumped the tinker. He shares his appreciation and tells Taz that he's headed to the festival in Solace. Taz gives him the bracelet in order to give it to Flint, as it may ingratiate Gaysil to the dwarf enough to share his booth at the festival, which Gaysil desperately needs. Then the story goes into great detail about Gaysil's life, how he's married to a harpy of a woman, and how he's unhappy. This is something that I feel like they finished this novel, and it was probably like 250 pages, and the editor was like, can you pad this out to just over 300? And they're like, well, I mean, we can go in a lot more detail about these sort of tertiary characters that the main characters run into and talk about their life ad nauseum, which no one would ever want. And it would be really boring if we ever did anything like that. And the editor was like, that's it. And the others were like, are you sure? Because this is really information that no one cares about. And the editor was like, yeah, We need to break 300, so do it. And that was it. The information they throw in there is like 1970s to 1990s schlock humor about battle axe wives. It talks about later on this bard who, it talks all about his life and his failed life and how he watched a bard one day and he knew that if he just tried to do that, then maybe he could get the fame that he always felt he deserved. And it goes into so much nonsense BS that has nothing to do with the story that I really do think it was just filler content that they had to add after the fact in order to meet the page quota. It's ridiculous. And the more I read content like this in these novels, the more I'm certain that each one of these prequel sort of, the Meetings Sextet and the Preludes, all each could have been around 200 pages, and it would have been a tight, adventurous 200 pages instead of all the filler BS that they add into it. That being said, so he sees Flint and Tanis and gives direction. Where am I? Oh yeah. So Gaisel sees Flint and Tanis and gives directions to Taz, but doesn't know that it's Flint, so he can't give him the bracelet. So he heads on into Solace. He arrives in Solace and takes up Flint's empty booth, wearing the bracelet for safekeeping. It warns him, it does actually warm up too, of opportunities, and he has a very profitable day because of it. He spends the evening in a drinking tent where he meets a wandering bard. Drunk, he tells the bard about the lucky bracelet that crashes in his wagon. Then he goes to crash in his wagon for the night. The bard breaks in, bashes him over the head, steals the bracelet, and skips town. Then we cut to Flint and Tanis returning with Tass in tow, looking for Gaisel. They find him in the wagon, learn about the bard, and Flint insists that they leave to get the bracelet before Selena finds him. As they're gathering rations for the trek, they run into her. And there was a little note here that I thought was interesting. I swear I've read it somewhere, that Tanis was staying with Flint, especially this early on in their relationship. But this sets up where Tanis actually has his own place. And I didn't think that was a thing. It was a little bit weird. Whatever. All right, so Selena is revealed to be a Dargonesti elf princess. Her father, the Speaker of the Moon, has died, and now they want her brother to take the throne, but it requires the ability to see the future. Since her brother doesn't have this gift, she commissioned the magical bracelet from Flint to fulfill this purpose. Now, with the bracelet gone missing, she insists on journeying with them to reclaim it from the imposter. They head out of town toward Tantalon, which is a town in Abanasinia I had never heard of, which is actually controlled by a lord knight, a knight of Solamnia, which makes no sense because in this era, all of the knights of Solamnia were run out of their homes. So it's weird that there's this rando town, but okay. So her magic tells her that that's where the bracelet is currently. On the way there, they are overcome by satyrs who end up charming them, forcing them to join in a night's revelry, and then rob them. They all wake up with fewer possessions than when they went to sleep and massive headaches. There's a lot of drinking in this novel. So the bard named Waldo arrives in Tantillan and uses the magic of the bracelet to get him dinner. He then plans on using it to become a member of the local Knight of Solamnia Lord Kirsten's court. He tells them of a plot that his son will be the victim of. Someone's going to abduct his son, and they have him stay as a guest in the keep while they plan on protecting themselves from the possible intrusion. The Lord's son is abducted anyway, and Waldo is taken into the dungeons. He's interrogated by the mage Balcombe, the same mage from the prelude of the story, and Waldo confesses to using the bracelet. It's clear that Balcombe is behind the son's disappearance, and Waldo is the perfect patsy for the crime. Waldo is hung, for real, like straight up murdered, and Balcombe takes the bracelet. I was really surprised with this, too. You don't get a lot of, unless it's like in a course of a battle or something, you don't get a lot of like straight up murder in these books. And usually, if there is murder, it tends to be other races, not human. I thought that was interesting that they straight up hung his ass and he was innocent of anything. I thought it was weird. So the companions arrive in Tantillin and sneak their way into the dungeons and ultimately Balcom's lair with the use of Selena's magic. They see the corpse of Waldo and search it, but the corpse comes alive as a zombie and attacks. Then Balcom enters and captures Tanis and Flint, and Solana and Taz escape. What I thought was really kind of cool about this scene was Balcom entered, and it immediately reminded me of the image of the bad guy in the Dungeons & Dragons cartoon, where he has like bat wings and like a big old dramatic cape. In this particular case, I think it said he had like horns on his head and like big old bat wings. But for some reason, the image just sort of stuck out in my head as being absurd and like overtly bad guy. I'm surprised he didn't have like a long twirly mustache that he constantly twirled. An unseen servant is sent after them, and they evade it until it disappears. Then, using Selena's potion of polymorphing to turn into sparrows, and then they re-enter the castle. And this is another thing that I thought was weird. They split the potion together. There was one dose, and they just split it. And it lasted for a ridiculously long time. So if they didn't split it, would she have just been able to polymorph for like days? It's so strange. All right, well, ultimately, they change to flies and then mice and enter Balcom's room. And this was a great part of the novel, which reminded me a lot of the Disney film The Sword and the Stone. It's great fun to experience Taz's polymorphing and his thoughts while he's polymorphing, and how annoying they are to Solana, who hears every thought he is thinking. As they enter Balcom's chamber, they overhear him speaking to Hidekel through the coin about a gem that holds the Lord's son and how Balcom wants to have Hidekel take out LaDonna and place him as the head of the Order of the Black Robes, because ultimately Balcom failed his test of high sorcery at the very beginning of the novel and should have been killed, but Hidekel made the deal with him. So Hidekel considers it, and as their conversation ends, he sees Taz and Solana in the form of mice trying to take the bracelet. He grabs the bracelet and flies off to his secret lair to fulfill the ritual, as Solana follows him as a bird. Taz goes down to the jail and breaks out Tanis and Flint as Solana's potion ends, and she is forced to land and swim upstream as the dolphin. She ends up cutting herself and comes back into sea elf form as a golem minotaur comes and captures her. And this was a really weird scene because the whole time this golem is slowly laboring toward her, she's all wounded and binded her arm and everything. And she's like, I must be really sick because I'm seeing this image of this stone minotaur coming toward me. It'll go away. And she closes her eyes and then she reopens them and she's like, wow, that stone minotaur vision is really getting close. That's weird. And then she closes her eyes again. Never once considering that that's a stone minotaur golem that's coming to get her. It's so ridiculous. It's as if she had never been outside of her own kingdom before and didn't realize that there was danger just being in the middle of the wilderness. So Tanis and Flint head in the direction Balcom went, and as they enter the mountains, the runoff is breaking up the ice covering part of a river that Tasslehoff is on, hence the cover of this novel. They can't get him out before he is potentially going to go over a waterfall, and coincidentally, phaethons collect the three and bring them to their cave. They're questioned about being in their territory, and rather than killing them, as they believe their story, they all agree to assault the wizard's lair together. However, the wizard has the bracelet and sees a vision of them attacking him. So he plans for their assault by trapping his lair. And this was another great moment where you got to see, first of all, Tasslehoff shine spectacularly as he's like disarming traps and avoiding areas and searching for secret doors and just being a straight up handler / thief, which Tasslehoff is, but you never really get to see him do anything exciting. This showcased his abilities really well. I really enjoyed it. So, the group enters and faces off against traps, monsters, and some of the phaethons are killed as they work their way to Balcom's ritual chamber. They find Selena bound and they attack, but it was just an illusion. Balcom stuns and captures everyone but Taz, and as Nuitari is rising in the sky, making the ritual imminent, potions that Taz set up explode and a giant that Selena made friends with crashes into the chamber. Balcom attacks it, and the spell holding the companions falls, so they all attack, and Balcom jumps into the vacant gem as the ritual time arises and is captured by Hidekel. The heroes leave and Selena grabs the bracelet. They say their goodbyes and Selena returns to her homeland. Taz notices the coin of Hidekel in his pouch and wonders how it got there. This was a great tale that highlighted Taz as a hero in his own right, and how Tanis and Flint begrudgingly grow to like him and consider him a friend. I really enjoyed it, and all the characters felt like themselves. If you like Taz or Kender and Tanis and Flint, I think you should definitely read this novel because you will enjoy the misadventure as I did. All right, so what do you guys have to say? Did the illustration of Flint pointing a finger at Taz become before this novel because it matched up beautifully? Yeah, actually it did. DL5 tells about how the companions all met. It was sort of the Bible that Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman were using when they were writing the novels. It talked about, the creation of the world, the timeline as they managed it thus far and everything. So that whole story existed, including those illustrations, before this book was ever even conceived of. Let's see. Hey, Cytheros, you haven't read this in like 20 years. Yeah, same here. Same here. But I really did enjoy it. Your biggest issue with the novel is the continued trope of these prequels ruining story beats from Chronicles, this time with the sea elf that Tanis seems to have forgotten about in Spring Dawning. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the reality is there's different cultures of sea elves. There's the Dargonesti and the Dargonesti. Then there's different regional settlements of sea elves all throughout. So the fact that they didn't seem to know what the hell the sea elves were in Istar's sea doesn't seem that strange because they didn't know they existed down there. And there's tales of sea elves, I mean, especially if you're an adventurer and especially if you are an educated noble from Quillinesty, then you would probably have heard tales about sea elves at that point. So the idea of seeing one being a little, they had a little bit of back and forth sort of snottiness, which I rather enjoyed. And then him not even thinking about them until 7-8 years later. I don't know. It didn't bother me that much, but I can definitely see your point. Taz taking out the goblin was cool. He had like a 13 strength above average in DL1. Yeah, Tasslehoff is great. And I love how he just jumps to mocking people, not just enemies, but like defensively, like a defensive mechanism. If someone calls him a thief or something, he just rattles off an insult instantly. Tasslehoff is dope. I love that character. You love how good the smith crafter Flint was in this in Flint the King novel. Even more tragic that his skills were lost during the War of the Lance, just like soldiers in the real world. Very sad. I mean, I love how people like his work is legendary. Selena could have gone to any metal crafter. She sought out Flint Fireforge because of his reputation. That tells you something. I loved that. And it fits in with everything we've ever learned about Flint thus far. And so it didn't feel out of place or odd or anything. And, I mean, Mary Kirchoff did Flint the King too, I think. So that makes sense that she would carry that through. Let's see. Yeah, Avenger is what I was talking about. Cool story beat about how many mages died outside the Tower High Sorcery. You love how the setting handles magic. I agree too. One of the main draws for me about Dragonlance is the fact that magic is so tightly controlled and contained that, you die. It's so powerful too, because, they have to keep it tightly contained because it's so powerful. And so, you can summon storms of lightning to decimate entire battlefields. So they wouldn't want just anyone being able to do that. They have to keep it governed and controlled, and the gods have a lot to do with that as well, due to the Second Dragon War. Or was it the first? I think it was the second. No, I'm second guessing that. In either case, like, that's what's great about it. It's so dangerous wielding magic that you have to take a test that potentially kills you. And then if you do die, that leaves the opportunity for all the bad guys in the waiting to come out and tempt, new potential evil slaves, like Raceland with Fisandalis and like Balcone with Hidekel. I like that trope a lot. And it also maintains that whole first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons idea that because you're so powerful as a mage, you are weak physically. And it takes a long time for you to progress to get more powerful. And you don't automatically get spells. You have to find them. And then you have to copy them. And you have to roll a percentile dice to see if you're even capable of memorizing or knowing it at all. So you may know 15 first level spells, but to scribe that 16th one might be too much for you. So, and you have limits per level based on your intelligence, not how big your spell book is. I mean, things like that help really rein in magic, which is so overpowered that you have to have it reined in like that. And when you have settings like, or systems like 5th edition, where everyone has basic, superpower abilities, it started in 4th edition, arguably, that it's ridiculous. It doesn't even feel, it's never felt realistic, so that's not fair, but I don't know. It just feels sort of silly at this point. Like, no, you don't have to memorize cantrips. You don't have to memorize, one-shot powers. You just shoot your magic blast. Pew, pew. All right. Super special. All right, what else? Hey, Malcolm, how you doing, man? You love all the Dungeons & Dragons mechanics mentioned in the novel. Yeah, loosely, though. They weren't heavy-handed with any of that stuff, which I really appreciate. Because, again, we all like to reference Dragons of Autumn Twilight came out of a Dungeons & Dragons session, which is not entirely true, even though they did put a preface in the actual book saying that. They just ran a couple games in order to figure out what a good party dynamic was, and they used that as a reference for what the characters should sort of be, basically. So it's not like the whole campaign was played through and then they wrote the novel. But they did inject a lot of game mechanics in that first novel, which they realized they couldn't do in the second and future novels because it gets cumbersome and ridiculous. It slows down the narrative of storytelling. And so I'm glad that they got rid of it. I like it being sort of suggested in ways like if you already know, then you'll be able to pick it up, but it doesn't heavy-handedly, lay it down. I've already cast my spells for the day. So even though in this one, it did sort of say that, Selena was like, well, I only can cast it 3 times and I've already cast my spells 3 times today. So I have to rememorize. And you're like, oh, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. All right. Hey, Michael, how you doing, man? Avenger missing part of the horn during the cartoon. Yes, he was. You remember reading this years ago? Hey, Don, thanks for tuning in. You love Tasslehoff. You never knew this book existed. Oh, you're in for a treat. If you love Tasslehoff, you should definitely read this novel. You will enjoy it. This is the first time you've heard the Sea Elves mentioned. Interesting story arc. Really? Well, there's a whole Sea Elf novel. All sorts of good stuff. Sea Elves in the novels? Yeah. They have their own novel. It's called the Dargonesti, if memory serves. I even reviewed it on this channel too, so you can check it out. It's not a great novel, but they're in the modules. They're in everything. They're even in the regular Chronicles trilogy. You think Taz doesn't get credit for being brave at times? He doesn't get credit for being the hero of all of the heroes. Like, there's this great moment in Spring Dawning when they get onto the Flying Citadel, and I'm sorry, that's Legends, not Spring Dawning. When they get in Legends, when Lord Sauce army and the blue, they don't call her the Blue Ladies' War is what it's called. So the Blue Lady comes in with her whole army and Lord Sauce army into Palanthas, flying a flying citadel, and all the heroes get up to the flying citadel, and they're like running around. Tasslehoff has this moment where he's like, I need to take control of this ship. I'm always... like, if it wasn't for me, all my companions would be dead because I may be getting them into some trouble sometimes, but I'm the one that always gets them out of trouble. And when you start reflecting back on scene after scene, you're like, yeah, statistically, Tasslehoff saves the heroes' butts more often than not. And he certainly did in that particular scene in the War of the Twins, maybe. But in any case, great scene, and Tasslehoff is a full-blown hero in my book. You love how Tanis came to Taz's defense in this and other novels. You always love the relationship. What do you think they related why do you think he related so much to Taz? I don't think he related to Taz personally. I think he was reacting to Flint's bombastic, begrudging behavior to Taz and generally everyone else. And so I think he was just that sort of intermediary character that was just like, hey, Flint, I know you haven't had a Snickers in a while and you're hungry, so you're like super grumpy and stuff, but he's not a bad kid. So let's give him a chance. And Flint, for as much as I love him being a grumpy old bastard, he liked Taz too. Even in this, he was worried about him and looking after him and stuff. So, it's really just Flint being Flint more than Tanis ingratiating himself to Taz. Tanis is just that sort of, mediator. And that's just his role he's always been in. And I like it. And I don't think he would be that way if it weren't for Flint specifically. All right. Yeah, lady. Thanks, Malcolm. Flying Citadel. That was awesome. I agree. You can make a valid case that Tasslehoff was the greatest hero in Krynn's history, even more than Huma. I would not make that argument, but I would listen to it. Him and a gully dwarf flew the Citadel. Yeah, it was such a great scene. And then they just left it on some dude's lawn. Like, this massive flying Citadel. Dude's like waking up, stretching his back, sipping his coffee, walks out to his balcony. He's like, what? There's a giant castle in my lawn. I think it's hilarious. It's so funny. You go back and read the originals. You don't remember much about the Sea Elves. Oh, you should. Yeah, I mean, they rescued the heroes. When they went into the Blood Sea of Istar and the whole Perishin, the ship, like collapsed under, Raistlin got the hell out of there with the dragon orb. The rest sank. Like everyone sank. They would have died if it wasn't for the Sea Elves saving their Tukas and dragging them into the remnants of Istar. In the modules, that may happen as well, but then you're actually given an opportunity to fight with the Sea Elves to win Istar back from the evil dragon armies trying to take it over. So there's like a whole battle that happens down there, which I would love to get to eventually with these modules, but I don't know if I ever will. Taz defeated Chaos. Yeah, that's true. You got me there. You think Flint loves Taz like a son or nephew or similar? Yeah, for sure. For sure, Charles. Thanks for tuning in, by the way. All right. Well, that is it. That is all the time I got. I'm going to do a member reading next. So thank you for tuning in to my review of Wanderlust by, wow, I put the entirely wrong people as the authors for this, by Mary Kirchoff and Steve Winter. Let's see. What did you think of Balcom and his motivations? Did you enjoy the inclusion of the Dargonesti elves and the phaethons? And finally, what do you think will come of that Hidekel coin? Feel free to email me at info@dlsaga.com or leave a comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. All that goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. And this channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga. Thank you so much for joining in that celebration. So until next time, my name is Adam with Dragonlance Saga. Slán Javá.